In the year 1392, a shocking event sent ripples through the small town of Oxford. A mother pig, had entered a humble home and, in a horrifying act, devoured the head of a 6-month-old baby named Agnes Perrone. The child did not survive the brutal attack. The news spread quickly, and the townspeople were left in a state of terror. Pigs, once seen as useful and manageable animals, were now viewed with a mix of fear and suspicion. This incident was not an isolated one. Throughout medieval Europe, pigs were a common sight in city streets, and their presence often led to chaos and danger. In the bustling cities of the Middle Ages, pigs roamed freely, often causing havoc and posing threats to both property and people. Imagine a city street in 14th century France. A large bristly pig leads the way, its swineherd following closely behind, guiding it with a rope tied around its back leg. The swineherd uses a stick to keep the pig moving, sometimes striking it on the rump if it stops in an unwanted spot. They are on their way to the market or the slaughterhouse, a common scene in medieval urban life. Pigs were not just visitors to the city, they were residents. Many city dwellers owned 1 or 2 pigs, raising them within the city walls. In Reading, England, a taxation roll from 1297 showed that 30 out of 102 households owned pigs, with only a few having more than 2. These pigs were bred and raised in the city, providing a steady supply of meat and a means of turning domestic waste into a valuable resource. In the cramped and often chaotic urban environment, pigs needed a place to call home. Urban regulations required that pigs be kept in dedicated structures called sties. In Aberdeen, Scotland, a 12th century law stated that pigs could only be within the town if they were kept in a sty. These sties were simple wooden structures, often found in the backyards of homes. A Flemish calendar page from around 1510 shows pigs feeding in a wooden sty, with a dovecote integrated into the upper part of the structure to maximize space. Maintaining a pigsty was no small task. The sties had to be cleaned regularly to remove manure, which was a significant health hazard. In Norwich, England, pigsties were cleaned every Saturday afternoon, the only time pigs were allowed out. The smell of the sties was a constant concern, and local governments imposed strict rules to control it. In Ghent, Belgium, sties had to be kept clean to avoid exposing the neighborhood to stench or foul air. Pigs in the city were at the mercy of their caretakers for food, but they were versatile eaters. Many medieval crafts generated waste products that could be used as pig fodder. Butchers, bakers, and brewers all produced waste that could be fed to pigs. However, local governments often regulated what could be fed to pigs to prevent the spread of disease. In Coventry, England, butchers were forbidden to give pigs the entrails of other slaughtered animals. When food was scarce, pigs were taken out to surrounding pastures or woodlands by swineherds. Most towns required the presence of swineherds to manage the pigs and prevent them from causing damage. In Deventer, Netherlands, a town pig herder was employed by 1348. These swineherds were responsible for gathering the pigs of the townsfolk and herding them out to feed beyond the city walls. Despite the efforts of swineherds, pigs often escaped and caused havoc. In Coventry, a 1421 proclamation commanded that pigs be taken to the wastes surrounding the city rather than into gardens, meadows, or fields. The Norwich Book of Customs from 1354 provides a graphic description of the damage caused by wandering pigs. Great injuries and dangers have happened in the city of Norwich, where boars, sows, and pigs have gone vagrant, hurting people and children, killing and eating children, and even exhuming buried bodies. Many houses and gardens have been destroyed, and the city has suffered greatly. Pigs were known to destroy property, root up bodies from cemeteries, and even kill children. In 1398, a court case in Nottingham recorded that a man's pigs had devoured a cockerel and some fish, causing 10 shillings worth of damage. In Shrewsbury, pigs were even known to bring dung and butchery leftovers into the church, much to the dismay of the local Dominican friars. Pigs were not only a threat to property and safety, they were also a public health hazard. The smell of pig manure and the presence of pigs in the streets contributed to unsanitary conditions. In London, street maintenance in 1315 included pavement repair, street cleaning, and removing vagrant pigs to keep the streets passable for carts and horses. The danger posed by pigs was not limited to property damage. There were several recorded incidents of pigs injuring or killing people. In 1131, the French Prince Philip was killed when his horse collided with a pig in the streets of Paris. Poets of the time, such as Chaucer and Eustache Deschamps, often referred to pigs as dangerous animals that could harm or even kill children. The presence of pigs in medieval cities was a testament to the complex and often chaotic nature of urban life. They were a source of food and income, but they also brought with them a host of problems. The balance between the benefits and the dangers of keeping pigs in the city was a constant challenge for medieval communities. As the sun set on the city streets, the swineherds would gather the pigs and return them to their sties. The city would quiet, but the memory of the day's chaos and the fear of what the next day might bring would linger in the minds of the townsfolk. In the medieval city, pigs were a constant presence, a reminder of the intricate and sometimes dangerous relationship between humans and animals. In medieval towns, pigs were a common sight, but they often caused trouble. Local governments had to find ways to manage these animals to keep the peace and maintain order. One of the main strategies was to impose fines on pig owners whose animals wandered into the streets or common lands. For example, in London, a rule from 1277 stated that if a pig was found roaming, it should be killed, and the owner would have to pay a fine of fourpence to the person who caught it. Similarly, in York, a fine of fourpence was levied on owners of pigs found loose in the city, day or night, and the person who captured the pig could kill it and collect the fine. In Malden, England, the fine for a loose pig was split between the person who caught it and the city. Colchester, in 1488, made it illegal for pigs to wander the streets, and any captured pigs were sold at auction, with the proceeds divided between the government and the finder. The town of Lynn, in 1331, allowed pigs to roam only on Saturdays, the common cleaning day, but owners were fined if their pigs were found on the streets on other days. These rules weren't just empty threats. In Lynn, records show that the "no pigs in streets" rule was enforced. In 1370 to 71, 47 different pig owners were fined, and 2 years later, 86 owners were fined in 675 cases. In Leicester, a goldsmith and his son even assaulted the town crier for seizing their wandering pigs in 1356. Pigs weren't the only nuisances, but they were particularly problematic. Norwich, in 1437, ordered that owners forfeit all pigs and ducks found wandering in the streets. In Dublin, the leading official swore to prevent cattle from being slaughtered in town, and to stop swine from running in the street. In London, an official was responsible for killing any pigs or geese found wandering, selling them, and splitting the proceeds with the city. Some towns became so frustrated with pig nuisances that they banned pigs from the city altogether. In the 13th century, the Croatian town of Korčula prohibited keeping pigs in the city, except between Michaelmas and Christmas. In 1423, Coventry banned keeping swine in sties, stalls, or houses, and violators were fined and lost their pigs. In 1489, the Duke of Bedford ordered the removal of all swine and swine sties from Dublin streets because they infect the air and produce mortality, fevers, and pestilence. Despite these efforts, many residents continue to keep pigs. In Ramsey, a small town in Cambridgeshire, court records show that pig keeping was common. The surviving court rolls name 77 individuals who owned pigs, and many likely had more than one. Bakers and brewers, who had plenty of food waste, often kept pigs. However, the location of pigsties was a frequent source of complaints. Pigsties were often built too close to roads, neighbors' walls, or drainage ditches, causing nuisances. In the 15th century, Ramsey began to issue more specific regulations about pig management. In 1414, an ordinance banned pigs from lying or feeding in the road, and in 1423, pigs had to be leashed and accompanied by a keeper to prevent injury to children. The fines for violating these rules were significant. In 1391, Henry Cooper was fined 12 when his pig ate his neighbor's goslings, and in 1436, John Luff was fined 3 shillings and 4 for an unleashed boar that broke down a door, knocked over a baby's cradle, and ate a blanket. Some residents, like the baker William Barber and the swineherd William Boteler, were repeat offenders, fined multiple times for improper pig management. The fines themselves were sometimes inconsistent, suggesting that they were more of a guideline than a strict law. For example, the fine for a wandering pig was initially 4d in 1414, raised to 3 shillings and 4d in 1423, and then lowered to 1 penny in 1460. However, the actual fines collected varied widely. In the mid-15th century, Ramsay required pigs to be ringed when sent to pasture in common areas. Ringing involved putting a metal ring through the pig's snout to prevent it from digging up the ground. This practice was not new. In 1248, the King of England had mandated that pigs in the forest of Clarendon be ringed. Leicester and Ghent also had similar ordinances. In Ramsay, 3 people were fined for having unringed pigs in 1543, and another in 1592. Pigs were allowed to graze in certain pastures at specific times, but they were not permitted in grain fields until after the harvest. Swineherds were responsible for keeping pigs in line, and the abbot of Ramsay, who owned much of the surrounding land, restricted pigs in his woodlands to protect his own interests. Despite the challenges, pigs remained a valuable part of urban life. They were easy to raise and provided a ready source of meat and fat. While the regulations and fines were necessary to manage the problems pigs caused, many residents found the benefits of keeping pigs outweigh the cost. In medieval times, pigs played a crucial role in the diet and daily life of people across Europe. Despite their reputation for being troublesome, pigs were a vital source of meat, and their importance can be seen in the way they were managed and used. Pigs were kept for their meat, which was a regular part of the medieval diet. Archaeological evidence from England shows that pig bones make up 10 to 20% of the animal bones found in both rural and urban areas. This means that while pigs were not the main source of meat, they were a significant part of what people ate. In other parts of Europe, such as the Basque region and Norway, similar percentages of pig bones have been found, indicating a widespread consumption of pork. Pork was not just a common food. It also held a special place in high-status households. In medieval Europe, pig bones are more frequently found at sites like castles and monasteries, suggesting that pork was a food reserved for the wealthy or those in religious orders. For example, in the household of Eleanor de Montfort, Countess of Leicester and Pembroke, records from 1265 show that her kitchen regularly consumed bacon and whole pigs. The kitchen would often take pigs from the castle stock or buy them from nearby estates, sometimes even purchasing them directly for cash. Over 5 months, more than 20 pigs were recorded as being consumed, often being processed into bacon and other cuts. The demand for pork was not just limited to high-status households. Even in towns and cities, pigs were common, and their meat was a regular part of the diet. In medieval England, pig bones are more frequently found at castle sites than in towns and villages, but this does not mean that townspeople did not eat pork. In fact, the archaeological record from medieval Belgium shows that while pigs were not enough to meet the town's meat needs on their own, they were still an important part of the meat supply. The way pigs were managed and slaughtered also gives insight into their role in medieval society. A manuscript illustration from the late 15th century shows a butcher slitting a pig's throat, with a woman collecting the blood in a pan. This blood would be used to make various dishes, such as black pudding. Another butcher is shown carving up a pig carcass, a process that was both physical and intimate, reflecting the close relationship between humans and pigs. Pork's importance extended beyond the table. Pigs were also used for their bones, which were turned into various objects like clasps, pins, and toys. This means that even after a pig was butchered, its parts continued to serve a purpose in daily life. The consumption of pork may have changed over time. In England, the percentage of pig bones found in archaeological sites decreased from the period before the Norman conquest to the period after the Black Death. However, this could be due to changes in the way other animals were produced rather than a decline in pig consumption. Additionally, the soft bones of young pigs and the practice of salting pork, which leaves no bones, may have contributed to the lower number of pig bones found in the archaeological record. In the late 14th century, the French poet Eustache Deschamps wrote a ballad about pigs, highlighting their usefulness in death. He listed the many parts of a pig that were valuable, such as pork back, hams, sausages, and lard. This reflects the medieval view that while pigs may not have been considered good in life, they certainly were in death, providing essential food and materials for daily life. Pigs were a common sight in medieval towns and villages, whether being sold in the market or kept in backyards. They were raised primarily for their meat, which was a staple in the diet of many people. Most pigs were slaughtered when they were about 1 to 2 years old, which was the ideal age for producing the best quality meat. Younger pigs were often preferred for fresh pork, while older ones were better suited for making cured meats. The slaughtering season usually took place at the end of autumn. This timing was strategic because it allowed the pigs to feed on nuts and other natural foods in the fall, which helped them gain more weight and fat. Since pigs typically had their piglets between March and May, the ones slaughtered in autumn were either 7 to 9 months old or around 18 to 20 months old. Archaeological findings from different parts of Europe, such as Yorkshire and Durs in Albania, confirm that most pigs were killed at these ages. However, there were exceptions. In medieval Tuscany, some pigs survived into their 3rd year, though most were still killed between 1 and 2 years old. In Norway, many pigs were older than 2 years when they were slaughtered, with the average age being around 3.5 to 5 years. Slaughtering pigs was a specialized task often handled by professional butchers, who were part of regulated guilds. In cities like Florence, taxes were levied on pigs at multiple stages: when they entered the town, when they were sold, and when they were slaughtered. The tax on pigs was higher than on sheep and goats, but less than on cattle. Butchery was a messy and smelly business, and by the late medieval period, it was heavily regulated to control where it took place within city walls. For example, in Coventry, butchers were not allowed to slaughter animals in the street, and in Paris, King Charles VI ordered the relocation of meat markets to reduce the filth associated with slaughtering. One of the most crucial steps in the butchering process was removing the bristles from the pig's skin. This was done either by scalding the carcass with boiling water, or by singeing it over a fire. Both methods were messy and required specific facilities, which is why many households took their pigs to professional butchers. The scalding process involved pouring boiling water over the pig to loosen the bristles, which were then scraped off. The organs were removed, and the edible parts were cleaned. This process generated a lot of waste, including blood, which was a particular concern for urban sanitation. Local governments often required butchers to dispose of waste properly, and to keep their areas clean. In Coventry, a common scalding house was established near a river to manage the waste more effectively. After the slaughtering, the meat needed to be preserved, especially since more pigs were slaughtered than could be consumed immediately. The two main methods of preservation were smoking and pickling in brine. Pork was often salted and stored in lard in wooden tubs. Bacon, in particular, was a common form of preserved pork and was widely consumed, especially in rural areas. In literature, such as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, bacon is mentioned in several stories, highlighting its importance in the medieval diet. For example, in the Nun's Priest's Tale, a widow is described as eating milk, dark bread, broiled bacon, and sometimes an egg. The lard from pigs was also a crucial ingredient in medieval cooking. It was used in many recipes, from frying onions to making sauces. Lard was the primary cooking fat in the early Middle Ages, though it was gradually replaced by butter in later periods. Even the bones of pigs were not wasted. They were often cut into chunks and used to make soup stock, adding fat and flavor to the liquid. Pork was prepared both at home and by professional cooks in the marketplace. In Norwich, legal records mention pasties, sausages, and puddings made from pork, sometimes leading to accusations of using diseased meat or reheating old products. Despite these issues, pork remained a central part of the medieval diet, providing essential nutrition during the lean winter months. Pigs were not just animals in the medieval world. They were deeply embedded in the minds and imaginations of people. They were a source of sustenance, but they also carried complex meanings that reflected the society's values, fears, and contradictions. In the medieval countryside and city, pigs were a vital part of daily life. They could be raised on almost any scraps, from kitchen waste to grains and nuts, making them an efficient and reliable source of food. Once fattened, pigs were turned into a variety of dishes, from sausages and bacon to fresh cuts of pork, all of which were highly prized. This made pigs a crucial part of the medieval diet, especially during the lean winter months. However, pigs were more than just food. They were also symbols that carried significant cultural and moral weight. For example, in the Irish story of Macdatho's pig, the king's enormous pig was a symbol of power and prestige. The competition to determine who deserved the best cut of meat highlighted the pig's role in social hierarchy and honor. This story shows that even though pigs were a common food, they could also be used to assert status and authority. The pig's role in medieval life was not without its contradictions. While it was a staple food for both the nobility and the common people, it was also seen as an unclean and gluttonous animal. This duality was particularly evident in religious and moral contexts. For instance, both Jews and Muslims considered the pig to be an unclean animal and refrained from eating pork, a belief that reflected deeper cultural and religious differences. These contradictions were also evident in medieval literature and art. Images of pigs often blurred the lines between the sacred and the profane. For example, in the Chester cycle, the shepherds feast on pork before receiving the news of Christ's birth, a scene that juxtaposes the sacred with the everyday. Similarly, in the legend of St. Nicholas, the saint rescues 3 clerks from a vat of pig's blood, a story that uses the pig to symbolize both sin and redemption. The pig's adaptability and its role in the food chain also made it a symbol of the cycle of life and death. Pigs were often depicted in medieval bestiaries and other texts as animals that were both useful and flawed, reflecting the human condition. This duality is seen in the way pigs were treated. They were raised with care but ultimately destined for the dinner table, a cycle that mirrored the medieval understanding of the natural order. In the end, the pig's presence in medieval society was a reflection of the complex and often contradictory nature of human life. It was a source of sustenance, a symbol of power, and a reminder of the moral and ethical dilemmas that people faced. The pig's role in the medieval mind shows that even the most ordinary aspects of daily life could carry deep and meaningful significance.